Hi, I'm Ellen Schwartz, and you're going to have just two speakers, right?
Yes.
Ellen, the other Ellen, and Nuri, and they will say something each about themselves. And that's all your time that I'm going to take.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you for your wonderful hospitality. You've been a terrific hostess.
Thank you for the hour.
And I'm really pleased to see all of you here. I live in the mountains of North Carolina now, but 10 years ago, I lived for 25 years in Washington, D.C., and 18 of them I was out in front of the White House with signs, most of the time, calling for an end to nuclear weapons, and a variety of other things, like open all borders and mines. And I don't know if any of you know Carol Erner. She was the co-chair of the Disarm End Wars Committee in the let's see. I guess I met her in 2006, and she immediately signed me up to WILF, and within a very short period of time, she asked me if I would like to be a co-chair, and so I said okay, and I've been co-chair of the Disarm End Wars Committee ever since. And I really feel, Carol and I traveled around California and up and down the West Coast in 2016, and doing the first nuclear-free future tour. And I don't know if any of you were at any of the talks that we gave at that time. Things have changed since then. We now have a ban treaty that is in the works, and that's really exciting. But I would like to talk to you some about the good things that some wonderful people are doing to further the goal of a world without nuclear weapons, and some of the legislation that it doesn't quite come up to snuff, and why I think that we should really focus our attention on that which is really trying to go all the way. So So in 2017, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons was adopted at the United Nations. And since then, and the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN, which, along with International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War and other NGOs in the United Nations, were responsible for raising the issue of the humanitarian aspects of nuclear weapons and what would happen if there were, specifically if there were an exchange between Pakistan and India, and what would happen to the whole world if that were to happen. And as a result, the United Nations has approved the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and there are now 70 countries that have signed the treaty, and 24 countries have ratified it. We need 50 ratifications for it to go into effect. Kazakhstan was the most recent. It just happened this week to ratify. And there was a resolution that was unanimously adopted last week, or 2 weeks ago, on July 1st, at its 87th annual meeting in Honolulu, supporting the treaty and asking for all U.S. mayors to join Mayors for Peace, which is an international group created by the mayors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which now has 7,764 member cities in 163 countries and regions as of June 1st, 2019. Other active supporters of the TPNW is what we call the Treaty for the Prevention of Nuclear Weapons, are, of course, WILF US, and there is a new and very effective organization by the name of nuclearban.us, and that's their website, which have been promoting legislation and pledges to support the treaty. And in 2018, Washington, D.C.'s Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton was the first to sign the ICANN Parliamentary Pledge, and Congresswoman Barbara Lee also signed the pledge in 2018. In 2018, the California Senate, as you probably know, approved a resolution calling for support for the TPNW, making nuclear disarmament the centerpiece of national security policy and spearheading a global effort to prevent nuclear war. Was anybody in here involved in getting California to do that? Good for you, Nancy. Yeah, that's wonderful. And in April, Representative Jim McGovern of Worcester, Massachusetts, introduced H-Res 302, a House resolution embracing the goals and provisions of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And this resolution has been referred to the House Committee on Foreign Affairs and to the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Strategic Forces. And I'd like to mention about these committees is the problem is that these bills, lovely bills, get introduced, but then they get sent off to committees and never get anywhere. And so when we're lobbying, we're not only lobbying our representatives to co-sponsor the bills that we approve of, but also we really need to do outreach to the committees and ask them to pass the legislation through to the floor so there can actually be a vote on it, because we haven't had, and that leads into telling you about Eleanor Holmes Norton's HR 2419. In 1993, we Vigilers brought a voter initiative in Washington, D.C., Initiative 37, calling on Congress to pass a law abolishing nuclear weapons and using the money instead to shut down and clean up the arms industries and to use the money that's saved instead for carbon-free, nuclear-free energy and health care and education and environmental restoration, things that we really need. And it didn't actually talk about carbon-free, nuclear-free energy in the beginning because we weren't as aware of the necessity for that in those days, in 1993. That has evolved, and Norton's bill has evolved also. And I thought I had a copy of that. Ellen, do you know where the copy is of the Norton bill that you printed out?
I put them on your stack of stuff, so they shouldn't come with them.
They might be back there, because I'd like to read it to you all. But what makes this session, there were some fairly significant changes. We've had co-sponsors over the years, but it was so inclusive because it was saying, one of the clauses that it had in there that it was make a good faith effort to end war and all military operations. And that was a great clause, and it would be a great bill to introduce on its own. But to mix it up with the shut down the nuclear industries and the nuclear power plants and clean up the mess, and then also throw in there end war at the same time, it was considered by a lot of the legislators as just a pipe dream and something that they didn't really want to invest any energy in. So this session, that particular clause has been taken out of the bill, and it also is talking about, specifically about ratifying the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, so it's very timely. And what makes it better, excuse me, I think I've already covered that. So Representative Jim McGovern immediately co-sponsored this version of Ms. Norton's bill the day that it was introduced, and hopefully we'll be able to convince all of our representatives to sign on. But we really specifically need to focus on the progressive legislators. Ms. Norton has said that it would be best to try to get the progressive legislators to sign on and not spend our time trying to change the thinking of the people who are adamantly opposed to it, because that, in fact, might be counterproductive for them to be opposing it. And so kind of sneaking up on them and have enough co-sponsors that they're going to pay attention to it. So what can we do as a branch of WILF or of Peace Action, or as individuals? In the Senate, we can visit our senators and ask them to actively support the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and to ratify it if the new president signs it. We can ask them to introduce into the Senate legislation similar to Eleanor Holmes Norton's bill.
We found it.
Great. Or at the very least, to introduce a resolution similar to Representative Jim McGovern's House Resolution 302, embracing the goals and provisions of nuclear weapons ban treaty, and encourage everyone you know to sign the online version of the WILF US petition supporting the treaty. And I've got up here on the screen, I had on the screen. Let me get it up there again. There it is. No? Should be. There it is. Okay. So this is the letter to your representative that you can go to if you go to prop1.org, prop1.org, which is the website that we vigilers set up to promote Eleanor Holmes Norton's bill. And also at the bottom of the page, here's a picture of Ms. Norton with the representatives from Nuclear Ban US, Vicki Elson and Tim Wallace. And there is Beatrice Finn from ICANN. And ICANN got the Nobel Peace Prize for their work on creating the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And at the bottom of prop1.org, you can find out more information about the vigil in front of the White House, which, by the way, even though I'm no longer part of it, it's still going on. It's been going on since 1981. Oh, wow. Yeah. And please forgive me my hesitation. It's the first time that I've gotten up and given this talk, and so I apologize for not being a regular lecturer. In the House, visit your representative to ask for co-sponsorship of Eleanor Holmes Norton's bill. Encourage everyone to sign on to the petition supporting the bill. Download and circulate the paper petitions, and on this prop1.org you can see here, I guess I'll pick it up. This tells you where you can link to get to the letter to the representatives online. There's a paper petition that you can download, print out, and I'm going to be passing that around to circulate. For the Senate, there's an online petition and a paper petition, and then there is this document that I'm speaking from today, Good People Doing Great Things. There's a lot of links of information.
I have copies of that here.
Yeah.
Pass around.
That give you links where you can actually look up all of these things that I've been talking about, and it's much too much to open it all up for you and go over it in detail. But this is a resource that you can use. And so
5 copies of the bill, which is another.
you can find, yeah, and let me read this bill to you. I think that it's important that it's not very long. It says, in general, the United States government shall provide leadership by signing and ratifying the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons or any other international agreement that provides for the dismantlement and elimination of all nuclear weapons in every country and strict and effective international control of such dismantlement and elimination. And 2, redirect resources that are being used for nuclear weapons programs to use in converting all nuclear weapons industry processes, plants, and programs, and in retraining employees to shift to a constructive, ecologically beneficial peace economy, which includes strict control of all fissile material and radioactive waste, and in addressing human and infrastructure needs, including development and deployment of sustainable, carbon-free, and nuclear-free energy sources, healthcare, housing, education, agriculture, and environmental restoration, including long-term radioactive waste monitoring, and actively promote policies to induce all other countries to join in the commitments described in this subsection to create a more peaceful and secure world. And it goes into effect, it says, when the President certifies to Congress that all countries possessing nuclear weapons have begun the elimination of such weapons under established legal requirements comparable to those described in paragraph 1, which is supporting the ban treaty. So, we need your help. We need your help in getting co-sponsors for the bill. We need your help in letting people know about it. We need your help in getting other organizations to take it seriously and start talking about it. Peace Action, of course, is an important organization in that regard. And Kevin Martin has been a friend for a long time, and there have been others who have promoted it to some degree, in the sense that they've put it into their newsletters and so forth. But to actually get behind it, to really take it on as their project, that's what we need. We need people to let other people know that this legislation exists, because it's the only legislation that has ever existed, ever, supporting complete abolition of nuclear weapons, up until this resolution that Jim McGovern introduced. There is other legislation that is interesting that's going on right now, but it doesn't go far enough. One is no first use of nuclear weapons without declaration of war by Congress, which was introduced by Ted Lieu in the House and Ed Markey in the Senate in January. And immediately, co-sponsors of that bill included presidential candidates Elizabeth Warren, Kirsten Gillibrand, and Bernie Sanders, and as well Senator Dianne Feinstein, whose office we'll be visiting on this tour, as well as John Garamendi, Anna Eshoo, Ro Khanna, Jackie Speer, and Zoe Lofgren, who are all co-sponsors of the House version of the bill. That was in mid-January, and at the end of January, Senator Elizabeth Warren introduced a second bill, and Adam Smith introduced it into the House, which read simply, "It is the policy of the United States to not use nuclear weapons first." And presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard is a co-sponsor of the bill in the House, as again are John Garamendi, Anna Eshu, Ro Khanna, and Zoe Lofgren, whose offices we'll be visiting. And Bernie Sanders, Kirsten Gillibrand, and Dianne Feinstein also signed on to that one. And that one, of course, takes it further than without congressional approval. That says we cannot use nuclear weapons first. And that's great. And as an individual, I support this. However, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, we had a pretty lively discussion about this, and there were some people who said, if you support that bill, we will leave, because we're pretty much absolutists. As when it comes to nuclear weapons, you know, no use is acceptable, ever.
I think it's just,
yeah.
I think it's just natural. They say, oh, if we're attacked, we're going to counterattack, that kind of thing, you know. I mean, I agree, it's just a losing proposition, you know. So that's probably their thinking, you know, but yeah, it's, oh, no, that's all I was going to say.
Yeah,
you know?
no.
Yeah, that's, you know, you ask most people, and they'll probably say that, you know, oh, yeah, we can't be attacked without counterattacking, you know. But it's, you know, it's just...
With nuclear weapons,
there's
it's no winning, yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Then there's the Hold the Line Act, which, again, Ted Lieu introduced into the House and Markey into the Senate to prohibit the research and development, production, and deployment of the Trident D5 low-yield nuclear warhead, with Senators Feinstein, Warren, Gillibrand, and Sanders, and Representatives Garamendi, Gabbard, and Speer, among others, as co-sponsors. There's the INF Treaty Compliance Act, which Tulsi Gabbard introduced to prohibit the Secretary of Defense from obligating or expending funds for missiles banned by the INF Treaty. There's the SAVE Act by Senator Markey to require certifications and reporting in an unclassified form related to the national security implications of the New START Treaty to provide for arms limitations in the event of the treaty's non-renewal. And of course, that's very probable right now, given our current president. And these are all partial fixes. What's beautiful about Norton's bill is it goes a lot further, and it would provide the funding for the Green New Deal. They say, where's the funding come from? It can start coming from nuclear weapons. They want to spend $1.7 trillion on new nuclear weapons. It's crazy. It's insane. So there are other campaigns that we, Wilf U.S. Disarm End Wars Committee particularly supports. Of course, there's Nuclear Ban U.S. that I mentioned earlier. And Tim Wallace has just produced an amazing document, Warheads to Windmills, How to Pay for a Green New Deal. And that's linked on the Good People Doing Great Things. And that it analyzes how we cannot solve climate change without the money and the brain power and the international goodwill we're squandering on nuclear weapons. There's Alliance for Nuclear Accountability. Has anybody heard of that group? Miralia Kelly from Livermore Labs is an active member of that, and is going to be speaking with us in Palo Alto later on.
She's not from Livermore Labs, is she?
That's where she, well, not the labs, outside the labs, yeah. From Livermore, California, yeah, sorry. Right, and ANA does DC Days event every spring that I highly recommend that anybody and everybody should go to at least once. Alliance for Nuclear Accountability was started nearly 40 years ago by people who lived on the outskirts of the nuclear weapons facilities, and they've been keeping an eye on Congress and the government for years, and they have these wonderful training sessions where Sunday you go in and you exhaust yourself learning, but you learn so much from them on Sunday, and then on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday you go lobby and present their proposals for revision. And I've done that many, many times and really appreciate the work that they do. They are working on specific problems, though. They are trying to deal with things like, for example, the Savannah River site in Aiken, South Carolina. They were trying to do MOX fuel there, which is reprocessing plutonium to make it into material that could be used in a power plant. And they couldn't get the funding. They couldn't get the funding for it from the private sector. They didn't want anything to do with it. So the MOX program has died. So what they're planning on doing now is using the Savannah River site for new plutonium pits. Now we had 15,000 nuclear warheads, so that means 15,000 plutonium pits. And now we have about 1,500 nuclear warheads. And the rest of them, the other 13,500, are in Amarillo, Texas, buried in the site there, and they're certainly usable. You know, they're not degrading. They're not, you know, they could be used any time if they really wanted to use them. The reason that they're building new plutonium pits is money for the people who have been making money. How do we get those people to figure out that they can make money other ways? Now, cleaning up the nuclear mess is a job that people can do that have been trained to make the nuclear mess. They know how to deal with nuclear problems, so let them have good jobs, well-paying jobs doing that. And otherwise, let's get the people who are making war machines, more and more weapons, more fancy weapons. Let them instead be doing the research and development of carbon-free, nuclear-free energy and get ourselves off of this crazy, crazy merry-go-round that we're on. Other groups keep Space for Peace, which opposes the militarization of space, saying no to NATO and supporting the closure of U.S. military bases in other countries. Veterans for Peace, especially the Golden Rule Project, which one of the WILF members, Helen Jacquard, and her partner, who is the president of Veterans for Peace, are taking a sailboat that was initially intended to be used to oppose the nuclear tests in the South Pacific. And it never got there, but the Veterans for Peace has obtained the Golden Rule, and they're on their way to Hawaii right now, and they're planning on going around the Pacific talking to various people about nuclear abolition. Don't bank on the divestment, folks. Don't bank on the bomb, which Susie Snyder, who was once the general, she had a high position in WILF, I forget what it was, and she's leading that campaign now, and they have, on their website, they have lists of major nuclear weapons producers and the financial institutions that support them that we can boycott. World Beyond War has a divestment campaign. Code Pink also has a divestment campaign. And then there's Back from the Brink. This campaign, which was organized in the U.S. by Physicians for Social Responsibility, calls on the U.S., and I quote, to lead a global effort to prevent nuclear war by 1, renouncing the option of using nuclear weapons first, 2, ending the sole unchecked authority of any U.S. president to launch a nuclear attack, 3, taking U.S. nuclear weapons off hair trigger alert, 4, canceling the plan to replace its entire nuclear arsenal with enhanced weapons, And 5, actively pursuing a verifiable agreement among nuclear-armed states to eliminate their nuclear arsenals. Now, WILF US has not been actively supporting this because we are, for whatever reason, for whatever reason. But I think we ought to rethink that, because I think it's a really good idea, and there's a lot of organizations that have signed on. In July, just a few days ago, CNN published an opinion by Ira Helfand of International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War that a campaign to focus national attention on nuclear weapons abolition has begun to take shape around the Back from the Brink platform, a Green New Deal for the nuclear threat. Supported by more than 200 professional associations, faith communities, peace and environmental groups, it has been endorsed unanimously by the U.S. Conference of Mayors and by the municipalities of Baltimore, Los Angeles, and D.C., as well as being approved overwhelmingly by the California and Oregon legislatures and the New Jersey General Assembly. So they're making progress with it. Now, if we could get them to take on HR 2419, those 200 organizations, that would be wonderful. And I think that in order to do that, we have to be able to say we're with you, too. So we need to be cooperating among ourselves. Those of us who are working on these issues, we really need to cooperate. Another thing that I wanted to tell you about is that we've gotten quite involved with we're getting quite involved with social media. WILF US now has a Facebook page, 2 Facebook pages. One is the formal Facebook page that a few people post to, but we've started up a new one, which is called WILF Smart, which is WILF Social Media Action Response Team that anybody who is a WILF member can join and use that as an organizing tool and help to educate one another about what's going on in your community. I think we really need to be working more with more awareness of what everybody is doing all over the country. We've got, how many branches do we have, Nancy? Do you know?
There are about 30 branches.
30 branches?
Pretty active, some more than others.
Right.
Everybody does something.
And I have been, since 1999, doing something called Nuke News, N-U-C-N-E-W-S, on Yahoo and on Facebook, more recently. We didn't have Facebook back in 1999. A lot of people know that I collect information and share it with me, and so I try to put it up there on Nuke News so people can keep up to date with what's going on with nuclear issues all over the world. And I appreciate hearing more information from the people who appreciate it. And I think that's all that I really had to say, except that I did want to mention, before I move on to introducing you to Nuri, is that Senator Tom Udall and Representative Anna Eshoo have introduced HR 2354, the Prevention of Unconstitutional War with Iran Act. And presidential candidates Gillibrand, Harris, Klobuchar, Sanders, and Warren are co-sponsoring. And I think that Tulsi Gabbard is probably co-sponsoring too. She certainly came out with a strong statement against going to war with Iran. And so this information is all available at prop1.org, and I encourage you to check into it, and you can write to me if you have any questions. I'm et@prop1.org.